Look at your hand right now, really look at it. 5 fingers, opposable thumb, soft skin, no claws, no venom, no natural weapon of any kind. By every biological standard, it is useless in a fight. And yet, that hand, and what it learned to hold, changed the entire history of life on this planet. Not the claw, not the fang, not the venom, the hand, and the idea behind what it picked up. Because here is the thing nobody tells you about the first tool ever made. It was not an accident. It was not luck. It was not instinct. It was a thought, a specific, deliberate, revolutionary thought that no creature on Earth had ever managed before. And the story of how that thought became everything you see around you right now begins with a rock. Just a rock, and the most dangerous thing that has ever existed, a mind that knew what to do with it. 2.5 million years ago, something happened on the plains of East Africa that had never happened in the 4 billion year history of life on Earth. An animal picked up an object, looked at it, and instead of seeing what it was, imagined what it could become. That gap, the tiny, invisible gap between what exists and what could exist, is the gap that built civilization. Every building you have ever entered, every vehicle you have ever ridden in, every piece of technology you have touched today, all of it traces back to one moment, one hand, one rock, and one thought that changed everything. Before tools, ancient humans were scavengers of the lowest order. Not even the good kind of scavenger. Not the hyena that fights for its share. Not the vulture that arrives first. The kind that waits until everyone else is finished, until the lions leave, until the vultures strip the bones, until there is almost nothing left, and then moves in carefully to see if anything remains. The most nutritious part of any large animal is locked inside the bones. Bone marrow, dense with fat, rich with calories. The exact thing a developing human brain desperately needed, and it was completely unreachable without the right tool. A lion cannot crack a femur. A vulture cannot crack a femur. But a rock, swung with enough force against another rock, can crack anything. The problem was, nobody had figured that out yet. Until one day, someone did, and the world was never the same again. In 1931, archaeologist Louis Leakey began excavating Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania. What he eventually found there was the oldest known collection of deliberately made tools on Earth. Small, simple, unimpressive to look at, but carrying the weight of the most important cognitive leap our species ever made. Olduvai tools, named for the gorge where they were found, dating back 2.5 million years. They look like nothing special. A rock, with a few chips knocked off one edge to create a sharp surface. Something a child might pick up and discard. But look closer, because what you are looking at is not a rock. It is a frozen idea. To make this tool, the maker had to do something that sounds simple and is anything but. They had to look at a round rock and see a sharp edge that did not exist yet. They had to hold a mental image of the finished object in their mind before the finished object existed. Then they had to work backward from that image to figure out exactly where to strike to produce it. That is called mental time travel, the ability to project yourself forward to an outcome that does not exist yet, and use that projection to guide your actions now. No other animal was doing this. Not consistently, not deliberately, not with this level of forward planning. The Olduvai chopper is not just the oldest tool. It is the oldest evidence of a mind thinking about the future, but it was only the beginning, because the next leap forward was even more extraordinary, and it took 1.5 million years to arrive. Around 1.7 million years ago, something changed. Not gradually, not slowly, a shift. A new type of tool appeared in the archaeological record, the Acheulean hand axe. And the moment you see one, you understand immediately that something fundamentally different is happening inside the mind that made it. The Olduvai chopper is functional, rough, efficient in a basic way. The Acheulean hand axe is beautiful, perfectly symmetrical. Both faces worked to the same angle, the edges meeting in a precise teardrop shape that is consistent across thousands of examples found on 3 separate continents. This symmetry was not accidental, it was not necessary. A slightly lopsided axe cuts just as well as a perfectly symmetrical one. The symmetry served no practical purpose, which means it served a different purpose. To make a symmetrical hand axe, you have to carry a 3-dimensional mental blueprint of the finished object, and constantly compare what you have made so far to what you intend to make. You have to hold the final image while working from completely different angles, adjusting, correcting, refining, not because the tool needs it, because something in the maker required it. Some researchers believe the symmetry was a signal, a display. Look what my mind can hold. Look what my hands can produce. Look how precisely I can translate an internal vision into physical reality. The hand axe was not just a tool. It was the first known demonstration of skill, the first object designed to impress as well as function. And if that is true, the hand axe is not just the oldest tool, it is the oldest art. But even this was not the most remarkable leap. The most remarkable leap came much later, and it required a thought so complex, so multi-layered, that even modern humans struggle to fully appreciate it. For most of human prehistory, tools were single objects. One rock, one bone, one piece of wood, shaped to serve one purpose: simple, direct, effective. But around 300,000 years ago, something new appeared: compound tools, tools made from multiple materials joined together. And the cognitive leap required to make a compound tool is so significant that researchers use it as a marker of modern human thinking. Think about what hafting a spear requires. You need a stone point, which means you need the right kind of stone, which means you need to know where that stone exists, which may be kilometers away. You need to travel there, select the right piece, carry it back, shape it carefully, without breaking it. You need a wooden shaft, the right species of wood, the right thickness, the right straightness. You need binding material, plant fiber or animal sinew, prepared correctly to be both strong and flexible. You need adhesive. Some ancient spear tips show evidence of birch tar, a substance produced by heating birch bark to a precise temperature, a process that requires controlling fire at a specific level, for a specific duration. 5 separate materials, 5 separate knowledge sets, 5 separate preparation processes, all held in mind simultaneously, all directed toward a single object that does not yet exist. And here is the thought that makes this genuinely astonishing. The person gathering birch bark for adhesive is not thinking about birch bark. They are thinking about a spear that does not exist yet, that will not exist for another 3 days of preparation. They are working now toward a mental image of the future, holding that image stable through days of unrelated tasks, across multiple locations, collecting multiple materials. That is not instinct. That is not reflex. That is planning of a sophistication that required a fundamentally new kind of brain. And the tools that followed pushed even further. Around 30,000 years ago, ancient humans invented one of the most elegant devices ever conceived, the spear thrower, called an otlotl. A simple stick with a hook at one end, that acts as an extension of the arm, effectively doubling the lever that launches the spear. The physics are exact. A longer lever produces greater velocity at the point of release. More velocity means more range. More range means you can kill prey from further away, with less risk, with more accuracy. Nobody sat down and calculated the lever principle with mathematics. Nobody wrote equations, but someone understood it. Intuitively, physically, in their body and their hands. Understood that a longer arm throws harder, and built a device that gave them a longer arm. Applied physics, before physics had a name. But the tool that stops every researcher who studies this period is not the spear thrower. It is smaller, much smaller, so small you could lose it in your pocket. 45,000 years ago, in what is now Siberia, someone sat down with a thin splinter of bird bone, and carefully, painstakingly, using a stone drill so precise it barely left marks, bored a hole through one end. The needle, less than 3 inches long, thinner than a modern sewing needle, made without metal, without precision instruments, by hands working entirely by touch and judgment. This object changed everything about how humans survived cold, because a needle means fitted clothing, not wrapped skins. Not draped fur, garments with seams, with shape, with layers that trap air, with cuffs that close around wrists, with hoods that seal around faces. Modern cold weather engineering, 45,000 years ago. But consider what making a needle requires. You must conceive of sewing before the needle exists. You must understand that thread through fabric creates a joint stronger than any other method available. You must understand that a hole at one end of a thin rod is what makes this possible. You must then figure out how to make that hole in a material as brittle as bone without splitting it, without drilling too deep, without applying too much pressure at the wrong angle. The needle is not just a tool. It is the product of a mind that can hold an entire chain of causation in its imagination. If I make this shape, with this hole, through this material, then I can do this, which means I can make this, which means I can survive this. A chain of future consequences, held stable long enough to produce the object that makes all of them possible. That is not just intelligence. That is the specific kind of intelligence that builds civilizations. Here is something remarkable about the history of tools. For the first 2 million years, progress was almost impossibly slow. The Oldowan chopper was used largely unchanged for nearly 1 million years. 1 million years, with almost no innovation. Then the hand axe, used with relatively minor variations for another 1 million years. But then something shifted. Around 50,000 years ago, the rate of innovation began accelerating. New tools appearing not every 1 million years, not every 100,000 years, but every few thousand years, then every few hundred, bone needles, fish hooks, nets woven from plant fiber, bows that could launch an arrow faster than any thrown spear, traps that caught animals while the hunter slept, boats that crossed open water, each one building on the last, each one requiring a slightly more complex mental blueprint than the one before. And here is the thought that ties all of this together. Every single one of these objects existed in a human mind before it existed in the world. Every chopper, every hand axe, every needle, every bow, was first a thought, an image, a future that someone decided to make real. The stone did not become a tool because nature shaped it. It became a tool because a mind looked at it and saw something that was not there yet. That gap between what is and what could be is the most dangerous gap in the history of the universe. Because once a mind learns to stand in that gap and reach forward, it never stops. 2.5 million years ago, someone picked up a rock, looked at it, and saw something that was not there. That thought, that single, invisible thought, has never stopped moving. It passed from hand to hand, from parent to child, from generation to generation, each one adding something, each one standing in that gap between what exists and what could exist, and reaching a little further than the one before. Every building standing right now began as a thought in a mind that could see something that was not there yet. Every vehicle, every medicine, every piece of music, every word you are hearing right now, all of it, frozen ideas, made physical by the same impulse that made the first hand pick up the first rock and refuse to see it as just a rock. The most powerful tool ever invented was never made of stone. It was never made of metal. It was never made of silicon. The most powerful tool ever invented by our species is the ability to look at what exists and ask what if it were different. That tool is 2.5 million years old, and it is still the most dangerous thing on Earth.